So I think where we left off yesterday, we're talking about like pride, hubris, downfall, Red Sammy's barbecue being at the tower, and arrogance and all that stuff. I was having a little technical difficulties at the end of the period. I don't know if this saved absolutely everything.
We stopped.
Pretty much we stopped there, I think. Okay, good deal. So one of, and I know I mentioned this yesterday, but just reiterating, I think if you were to go, hey, the town is Timothy, and there's a book in the Bible, Timothy, therefore they mean the same thing, you'll get some rolling of eyes. I think if you were just to go, there's the Tower of Babel story, which we kind of mentioned, there's some connection, rolling of eyes. I think the fact that you have both of them put together still could get some rolling of eyes, but you know it gives it a little bit more credibility. Plus, we know that OConnor tends to do a lot of that kind of religious allusion stuff anyway. As you're thinking about rhetorical devices, certainly allusions could be something that you could use. I hope I said this before, but if not, keep in mind you don't have to go in that direction. If the idea of going into those things, you're going, I really don't know anything about the Tower of Babel, then don't write anything about the Tower of Babel. You're probably going to cause yourself more worry than it would be worth. There are certainly other things that you could go about with it. But based on the stuff that she's done in her other stories, based on the things that she does all throughout this, I think there certainly would be enough credibility that you could kind of create an argument with that. We didn't get to talk about, I know what Justin mentioned about the "You're One of My Babies" line. Let's take a look at the meeting between Misfit and Grandma at the end of the story and see what we can pull from there. Take out your copy, because we're going to look at page 20. Aside from the "You're One of My Babies," any other like reactions or things that you remember or noticed from conversation taking place that jumped out for whatever reason?
Well, like keep on saying you're a good man. This from the title.
It's hard to find. Hey, it's hard to find. So the repetition of "You're a good man." Okay. Anything else?
The fact that the Misfit just keeps bringing up the papers that he was never shown.
And what, supposedly, like, what did the papers prove?
That he did the crime.
Which is
Killing.
who specifically? Like, what's the one that really gets to him? I mean, we know he kills people. Clearly, we know he kills people based on what's going on. But the main accusation is that he killed his father, and he goes, no, my daddy died in 1919 with the influenza epidemic and all that kind of stuff, but they had those papers on me. So papers dealing with the murder of his father certainly seems to be a pretty big concern. Is this like Cuckoo's Nest character, like crazy, insane? Is this someone who's delusional? The fact that he's a serial murderer, does that kind of make him insane? What, like, mentally, how would you kind of characterize, I don't want to say diagnose, but...
He seemed kind of sound. Like, he didn't seem like he was, like, completely deranged. He seemed like he was more, like, he was fixated on certain stuff. But other than
That's a good word.
He was really safe.
Fixated, but still kind of like. I feel weird using a term like this because you're dealing with a murderer. He seems kind of rational, at least in the way that he explains things, and that might be emphasized more so by how unstable grandmother is becoming at this point. Now, certainly, he's in a more position of authority and power, as opposed to Grandma, who is, clearly doesn't have anything going on well for her. But kind of stable / rational. Now, that's not to say that you might not view him differently. But he, in some ways, there does kind of seem to be some clarity with him that this isn't a total lunatic.
Like calm, cool, collected. Like he just seems like put together. Like he knows what he's doing.
Which the flip side of that could be, therefore he is insane for being so cool, calm, and collected about what he is doing to these people. So it's one of those, six one way, half dozen the other could kind of be the argument that's taking place with it. I want on page 20 up at the top, the first full paragraph, alone with the misfit. I'm going to start reading. Just kind of follow along. While reading, just if anything pops up to you where you kind of go, ooh, that's weird, or I kind of forgot about that detail, just put like a little star or mark next to it, and then we'll go, hey, anything else you're picking up on? Alone with the misfit, the grandmother found that she had lost her voice. There was not a cloud in the sky nor any sun. There was nothing around her but woods. She wanted to tell him that he must pray. She opened and closed her mouth several times before anything came out. Finally, she found herself saying, Jesus, Jesus, meaning Jesus will help you, but the way she was saying it, it sounded as if she might be cursing. Yes, the misfit said, as if he agreed. Jesus showed everything off balance. It was the same case with him as with me, except he hadn't committed any crime, and they could prove I had committed one because they had the papers on me. Of course, he said, they never show me my papers. That's why I sign myself now. I said long ago, you get a signature and sign everything you do and keep a copy of it. Then you'll know what you've done, and you can hold up the crime to the punishment and see, do they match? And in the end, you'll have something to prove you ain't been treated right. I call myself the misfit, he said, because I can't make what all I done wrong fit what all I gone through in punishment. Excuse me. There was a piercing scream from the woods, followed closely by a pistol report. Does it seem right to you, lady, that one is punished a heap and another ain't punished at all? Jesus, the old lady cried, you've got good blood. I know you wouldn't shoot a lady. I know you come from nice people. Pray, Jesus, you ought not to shoot a lady. I'll give you all the money I've got. Best line in the story. Lady, the misfit said, looking beyond her far into the woods, there never was a body that gave the undertaker a tip. You're going to die. There were two more pistol reports, and the grandmother raised her head like a parched old turkey hen crying for water and called, Bailey boy, as if her heart would break. Jesus was the only one that ever raised the dead, the misfit continued, and he shouldn't have done it. He'd shown everything off balance. If he did what he said, then it's nothing for you to do now, but throw away everything and follow him. And if he didn't, then it's nothing for you to do but enjoy the last few minutes you got left the best way you can by killing somebody or burning down his house or doing some other meanness to him. No pleasure, but meanness, he said, and his voice had become almost a snarl. Maybe he didn't raise the dead, the old lady mumbled, not knowing what she was saying and feeling so dizzy that she sank down in the ditch with her legs twisted under her. I wasn't there, so I can't say he did it, the misfit said. I wish I had have been there, he said, hitting the ground with his fist. It ain't right. I wasn't there because if I had have been there, I would have known. Listen, lady, said a high voice. If I had have been there, I would have known, and I wouldn't be like I am now. Its voice seemed about to crack, and the grandmother's head cleared for an instant. She saw the man's face twisted close to her as if he were going to cry, and she murmured, why, you're one of my babies. You're one of my own children. She reached out and touched him on the shoulder. The misfit sprang back as if a snake had bitten him and shot her 3 times through the chest. Then he put his gun down on the ground and took off his glasses and began to see them. Anything else?
Well, we were talking about yesterday how she was like saying like my baby, and it was because of the shirt, and I think that kind of reinforces the fact that usually when you're like talking to somebody you care about, you're like, oh, you're my baby, but she literally just touched the shirt.
Mm-hmm. So at that point, so we were saying reaching out to touch him right before she gets shot. Do you think she's visualizing Bailey at that point, or do you think she's trying to make some kind of new connection with Misfit?
I think she's just trying. I think she's kind of losing it.
Okay. So where we're going, stable, rational, or at least, Noelle and I were saying to each other, stable and rational for the Misfit. Grandmother kind of going in opposite direction at this point. Grandma starting to lose it.
I think he's also like rational because if you look at a lot of like serial killers, they're actually like very, very intelligent, and smart. They just have like something's off. So
Lots of things. Sometimes.
So with what you're saying, then that this doesn't make him all that much different than from like other
Yeah.
serial killers in that sense.
Yeah,
But
I'm
there's
sort of agreeing. He seems to be like perfectly well aware of what he's thinking and doing, and has like what seems to be a reason at least for doing it.
Okay, Kobe, and then we'll go back to.
I think
Emma
the
Noah.
misfit, when he's doing his whole monologue about saying like I've never been punished for, I've got a different type of punishment than what I did.
Mm-hmm.
Like I sense a lot of bitterness.
A lot of
Bitterness.
bitterness.
Like he's been wronged by society.
Yeah. Does it make sense that you the one gets punished a whole heap, other people, hardly at all?
Right.
Which we would assume heap of punishment coming for him, not as many people being punished as what they should. Noelle and then Emma.
I had never really caught like the reason, like the specific reason that he was killing people until I heard it read out loud. But like the line, because I can't make what all I done wrong fit what all I gone through in punishment. Like, is he killing people so that it like they're even? Like he feels like he's punished more than like what he committed, so now he's like committing more so that it's
Trying to balance everything out. Almost like the law, the arm of justice is right here, pointing the gun at you. We're going to make everything fair, squared away. So is he like seeking fairness? And it at least in his mind, this does make everything okay. Kind of like equals things out. Now we could certainly sit here, and I'm not going. Lizzie is now going to write an essay about why it's okay that the misfit is going around killing everybody, or anything like that. But in his mind, going to like intelligent, rational, it makes perfect sense. There is some logic, reasoning behind it. Does that give him the right to do it? Whole other issue, question, and whatnot.
I was gonna say something kind of from the same thing as Noel because it's pretty obvious he has some sort of ulterior motive just because he literally says he has no pleasure in killing people. And it's kind of obvious.
And we didn't get to the follow-up line, of course, afterwards, where Bobby Lee goes, "Hey, this is some fun." Like, shut up! There's no pleasure in life. She would have been a good lady if someone was there to shoot her every moment of her life, which is still a big thing to kind of take a look at. But yeah, he's not fist pumping when it's done. It's all right. Let's go.
Let's
I
go
guess
out.
another reason that he gives is like the third paragraph from the bottom, where he says, if Jesus did what he said, which he said, then it's nothing for you to do but throw everything away and follow him. And if he didn't, then there's nothing for you to do but enjoy the human to God killing somebody and burning down his house. So I feel like he's saying like, I don't know. It's like Jesus failed me, and so now the only course left is to go out and kill me.
Because in regards then to like what Noelle and Emma, like making one name out of you, Emma and Noelle said, in relation to that, what's the problem if you're going with the line that Jesus raised the dead, Jesus has
He's reversing Jesus' work.
he has saved people. Wait a minute, that's not fair. And again, I'm not trying to make everything go back to Siddhartha, but it's just because we've read it. There's a profound difference, I would say, between, or one of the most profound difference between a Buddhist or a Hindu and a lot of Christians would be, how do you get to that special place if you're Hindu or Buddhist? You have to elevate yourself to that godly thought, that nirvana. You have to leave this existence, and you got to get up there with the gods. What would a lot of Christians would argue? I mean, yeah, ultimately you want to go up to a heaven, but
That's only God's law.
God came down to people through the form of Jesus, so I don't have to elevate myself. He's already come down, and that's a profound theological difference between a lot of those religions. And if he has done that, then that might not be fair. That everyone would be saved. I'm not. I got punished. So yeah, maybe I do kind of have to even things out a little bit. There's certainly some irony with the repeated phrase, "You're a good man." Um, is he a good man?
No.
I think most people go no, but you never know. If someone does go yes, you could argue that maybe he's a reasonable man so far as his logic. I think you could also argue, though, okay, he's not a good person, but guess what? There's not any other good people really within the story either. Bailey doesn't seem to be good. The kids seem to be brats. Grandmother? Well, but that's different from saying, naive and ignorant versus being like stupid.
She got everybody killed.
What does she start to do, though, by the end in regards to her belief? Maybe you start to see, some doubt kind of creeping in on part of the grandmother. How then could that maybe tie in with she would have been a good woman if someone were there to shoot her every moment of her life? Where's he going with that whole kind of statement, Annalise?
I think he's trying to say that, if someone was there, because at the beginning of the scene where where she was gonna die and she was facing the mystic, she was trying to get him to repent and still holding on to her beliefs, and only when she realized that all hope was kind of lost and she was gonna die when everyone else died did she start to lose her faith. So maybe he's trying to say that if she was presented with these life-threatening situations all the time, her faith would always be strong and she would kind of learn to hold on to it better than she had because she kind of let it go in the end.
Okay.
I would basically.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't want to say anything because I don't want to say anything that Kobe might have.
I was gonna say I think it means the metaphorical shootings, basically hey, this is a good idea. No, it's not.
What's that?
I think it's trying to. I think it's basically saying if someone were to play devil's advocate for a lot, in order to say it, then I think she would grow to be a more rational, but more strong in her faith.
Which I would say would go on the same lines along kind of like what Annalise is saying, that you got to be put in that not in that presentation, in that situation to kind of find out what those true beliefs are going to be.
The way that I read that line is I always thought of it as him trying to bring her down to his level. If you had suffered the way I did in life, you would have turned out better.
Mm-hmm. And maybe appreciate some of the things that you have had and some of the things that you haven't had to deal with that I have. Emma, did you have anything else?
I have a question for Kobe.
Okay. I think if you take a look at those things, if you had been put in a situation where you didn't feel that you were automatically going to be saved or redeemed, because I think Grandma certainly seems to take comfort in knowing I'm a good person. I'm quote unquote faithful. I'm polite. I present myself well. If my body were found dead on the side of the road, they would know I'm a good lady. All that beautiful foreshadowing that's taking place throughout the course of the story. But then when push comes to shove, there's a little bit of doubt that starts to come in, which does kind of make her human, I think, more so. If you go back to that initial concern with Grandma, that there is arrogance with her, that not only that maybe she's better than other people aren't really as good as they used to be, I think it really also could be, hey, I'm not maybe as good as I thought I was, and I do need to have some kind of downfall or some kind of realization a la the people at the Tower of Babel to actually understand, what, maybe I haven't been everything that I thought, I have been in life. I need that kind of situation to bring that to life. The one line, not one line, but the one part that it just makes me kind of wonder, I don't even want to say what makes me kind of wonder. Look at the middle paragraph here. After the whole, it sounded like she was cursing. Look at it in a vacuum. Jesus, the old lady cried, you've got good blood. I know you wouldn't shoot a lady. I know you come from nice people. Pray, Jesus, you ought not to shoot a lady. I'll give you all the money I've got. Syntactically, if you look at it isolated, it looks like it's a conversation between Jesus and herself. Jesus, you wouldn't shoot me. I know you come from nice people. Jesus, don't do that to me. Don't shoot me. I'll give you all the money I got. Now, is the misfit Jesus? No. Don't write that in your essay either, Byron.
Don't worry, I wasn't
What if
trying
I
to-
write a whole essay arguing how Misfit is actually Jesus?
You actually would probably be able to get enough evidence from this. Honestly. And no, you wouldn't get it saying, and this is kind of like how we talk about with McMurphy, you know, with Cuckoo's Nest. You're not going to go misfit equal sign, you know, Christian fish as your title.
Misfit is
But
Jesus.
Jesus fish, as we called it with Siddhartha. But what is he kind of bringing down a little bit? We said arm of justice. He's the judgment, and she's always kind of looked at. You would assume Jesus as being the judgment. It's at least kind of having her moment where, okay, she's aware of her reckoning somewhat a little bit more than maybe she otherwise would have been. So that parallel with it, and hey, he shoots her 3 times. Father, Son, Holy Ghost. Yay. There's one more detail I know you could throw in. It's not, again, that he is going to be Jesus, but he at least provides that opportunity for her to maybe be saved a little bit. Even the way it is set up, so far as, like, you know, if you were blocking this on stage, you got Grandma down in a pretty prone position, you know, kind of praying for her life. You got him with a gun right above her. I mean, it basically is going to look like she's praying in front of him, kind of begging for him to let him go. You have 2 critical interpretations that tend to take place with this story. You have one group of people who will read it and go, at the end, by meeting the misfit and having the "you're one of my babies" line, that she is actually trying to show grace and charity toward the misfit. That she actually is trying to save him. It's like her one last, this is a moment of grace, I'm going to try to save this person. The other line of thought tends to be that by interacting with the misfit, the grandmother realizes that maybe she was not as good and holy of a person as she thought she was, but she at least realizes it before it is too late, before her ultimate death. Whereas if she had not met the misfit and had died, she wouldn't have had that opportunity for salvation to come her way. But by meeting the salvation, it's able to take place. Or by meeting misfit, that's able to take place. So those are 2 critical thoughts that happen with it. Emma's argument, hey, could I like put a whole essay with he is, like, yeah, that's kind of happened before, or that's like a critical, again, not going equal sign to it, but the idea that that's kind of her savior in a way with it. Plus, you go back to the title, the irony, good man is hard to find, could go, because there aren't any anywhere. And this is the best that we've got. Which, if we're arguing that the misfit is kind of rational and makes sense, that's pretty sad commentary about humanity in general, if that's the best example that we have overall with it. Anyone know who John Wesley is? Aside from, like, the little boy, like, outside of the story. You're going to go same thing, the son?
He was like a Methodist pastor.
He's the founder of, like, the Methodist Church. So you got this devout Catholic, people don't realize how much trouble they're kind of in belief. She does name symbolism already, you know, with Crater and kind of even Misfit in a way a little bit, and Shiflet. Wouldn't shock me if she's even kind of doing a little comical satire with, you know, those Methodists, those Episcopalians. They don't even know what's really kind of going on. They should have the same belief system as me, so let's shoot little John Wesley and his friend Martin Luther, who is not in the story. I'll mention that.
What if the cat's hurt?
Emma, Pity Sing, you know, is like Judas or something, traitor on the family. The little cat, you know, causes them all to die. That could be body paragraph.
If it is Jesus, then that wouldn't make any sense. Well, maybe that's how he called Jesus.
Well, twisted Jesus, you know.
Then it would make sense because if the misfit is the exact opposite of Jesus, then Judas would be the exact
Hey,
opposite.
the misfit,
Join him.
he's flanked on each side by like a petty criminal, Bobby Lee and Hiram.
What I'm saying is, what
That's
if,
a good one.
no, what if the misfit is actually killing all of these people so we can have disciples on the other side?
Oh my god. Emma, I really need this shit.
Okay, guys.
All right. You have to do rhetorical analysis. 3 body paragraphs. How many examples per body paragraph? 3. 3. You're going to cite them as you normally do. You don't have to do a works cited page for this story because you don't have like the publication information. So you'll still go like OConnor 9, OConnor 4, with your citations, but you don't have to have a works cited page. Of those 3 examples, at least 2 have to be quoted. The curveball, and I'll have this in writing for you on Monday again, and this really should not wreck any papers or ideas. No quoted passage can go beyond 6 words.
You just killed
It doesn't change
That means my essay's long
anything. So, not quotes total, but no single passage is going to be more than 6 words.
Okay.
So, what you're not going to do also, because certainly people kind of think about this, is go, the misfit, ... and then shot 3 times. And I want you to include everything in the middle there too, Mr. Kane. It would only be the words that you write. Now, this doesn't eliminate you using any devices. It doesn't eliminate you using any examples. So, when you did your Siddhartha TWA, you used a lot of specific examples coming from the book. I realize it wasn't rhetorical analysis, but you still had specific examples. When you did your Cuckoo's Nest TWA, you had a lot of specific examples. How did you explain it? You put it in your own words. So you can still use examples, and I still do want you to quote, but they're going to be shorter quotes that you are probably going to work in and embed into your own writing. All right? But it does not eliminate any. A concern that folks have with short stories, and I think they were thinking of The Life You Saved, maybe your own more so than anything else. Closing, or well, not even the closing line. When he makes his little figure in the sun, we said he forms a crooked cross, and that could be an example of could go illusion. There's also, I think, a J term that we use. You could say juxtaposition. All right. So, just to kind of give you an example of how this would work. Say you want to focus on the use of juxtaposition. What could be a quote that you pull from the story that is less than 6 words? Crooked cross. You don't need, you could even just go, he forms a quote-unquote crooked cross. You put the page number next to it. You're fine. Well, I'll let you ask your question first.
Well, this is gonna. Did you say you could or couldn't do the thing with the ellipses?
You can always use ellipses, but it's the ellipses you can't assume then that this person or anyone else will read the omitted part.
Okay.
So if you are using the ellipses to cut down a passage because you only need this part and this part, that's fine. But don't go like the ... misfit and then expect that the person's going to read through this big long paragraph. Okay? Does anyone have a concern about using juxtaposition as one of your rhetorical devices for a full body paragraph?
Ask for questions or ideas?
Well, does anyone have a primary concern? Because I think some folks will go, I like this idea of juxtaposition, but I know some folks are going to go, wait a minute, I'm going to have a problem.
I mean, I feel like there's a lot of examples, but finding specific enough, crooked cross is really specific. I feel like in genre, a whole thing, religion, just finding certain.
Yeah. So and I don't think it's just the one nice thing is at least, and if you were to write about this story, pick the story that you like the better because you're going to be more willing to kind of sift through it a little bit more. I think a lot of folks would go, hey, I got a prime example of juxtaposition that I could use here. Where some folks are then going to start to go, well, I don't know if I can make a whole paragraph out of this, is can I find other examples of juxtaposition? Or a similar thing could be happening. You remember we mentioned apostrophe / invocation, that final quote, that Shiflet uses at the end. Which you could still quote, no, you can't go break forth and wash the slime away from the earth, but you could go, as Shiflet drives, he asks God to wash the slime from the earth, 6 words. But Mr. Kane, I don't know if there's other examples of apostrophe, I don't know if there's other examples of juxtaposition. How can I come up with 3 examples or 3 quotations within a paragraph if I only have 1? Anyone dangerous.
Make up a quote. Put it
No.
in.
Wing it.
When you do rhetorical, and part of the reason too that I'm having you do this with the 6-word thing, I want you to be able to start explaining things in your own words a little bit more. Also, this is kind of like a quasi TWA take-home essay, because when you would do a TWA, you're not going to spend a whole bunch of time with big long quotes because it's just going to take you too long. Now, I'm not asking you to set a timer for 40 minutes while you're writing, but it's at least going to be a little bit more in that TWA style. If you go with the first one, juxtaposition, crooked cross, juxtaposition emphasizes the contrast between two things. So if I'm trying to look at, okay, Shiflet is a perfect juxtaposition, really, of humanity, he is a quote-unquote crooked cross, I would like to prove how he does some things that are good and how he does some things that are bad. So what could a second example or quote be? Something
Good they did.
good. My third one could be something bad. Are those second and third quotes in themselves examples of juxtaposition? Most likely not. Are they reinforcing my argument that she is using juxtaposition to connect it to whatever your argument is? Yes, I am. So same thing kind of like with the apostrophe at the end. You could have that quote as your example of apostrophe. Your other quotes, your other examples could reinforce how this connects back to the other main argument. Now, you might have some things where, you do mention, and this could certainly work for both stories, hey, there's examples of allusion. There's examples of allusion over here as well. You could absolutely reference multiple things of allusion in either story, but just because you're limited to maybe one example of apostrophe or one example of juxtaposition doesn't mean you cannot write about those ideas. Follow where we're coming from with that. Off the top of your head, what other devices come to mind? Just like in general, for either story.
Foreshadowing.
You got, which one are you thinking about?
Good man.
Yeah, I'd say good man, you got a ton of foreshadowing happening. And you could do foreshadowing something along the lines of, hey, a day of reckoning is going to come for everyone, and it was pretty clear that this was going to be happening to Grandma. We were just taking a look at the use of, repetition or syntax. There's certainly, examples in both where you would be able to have a look of symbolism happening. Imagery is going to play a big part in both stories. That use of irony certainly is occurring in both. So the devices are there. It's just finding which ones work best with whatever that argument is that you ultimately decide to go with.
So we should probably develop the argument first and then
Yes.
see out of all these lists which ones.
Yes, because what does happen, and this would be true with any rhetorical analysis essay, if you start going, ooh, yep, I know that, and I know that, and I know that, all right, let's go, you might have a hard time getting an argument that's going to encompass all of those things. But if you go, this is the main argument that I'm picking up that O'Connor's trying to get across with the story, I think you have a much better chance than of going, all right, how does she go about doing that? And I mean, indirect characterization would certainly still be possibilities out there. You can do some things with diction and tone and whatnot, but a list of juxtaposition, apostrophe, syntax, foreshadowing looks pretty different from the fiction, imagery, detail days, of the Grapes of Wrath. When you were looking for 3 examples of imagery or 3 examples of details, but you in some ways kind of had a more separated paragraph than what you could have with a unified one, just with going with the word of crooked cross. Anything else?
Does the argument have to be, is it like an argument related to life, I guess, or is it something related to the story? Like if you said that the misfit is Jesus, like that's related to the story, so would that not be like an argument?
I don't think Emma's argument is probably going to really work for what it is that we want to do. Usually, you would be kind of looking for, I don't want to make it sound like a fortune cookie, but like a universal truth,
Okay,
that would be out there. Remember, she tends to have some general criticisms of humanity. So you could have something that O'Connor highlights the arrogance, of ignorant people that don't realize what could happen to them. That would perfectly be fine. Now, could Emma still work in like an allusion, allegory paragraph into an argument? Yeah, absolutely. That anyone can be judged at any time by anyone. And that in itself can kind of be irony in the way that the misfit is the one that makes grandma realize this. So you don't even have to get into that whole religious argument. Some people don't want to go anywhere near it, and I completely understand. Others will be, hey, head over heels, yep, this will be good. So don't feel the pressure to twist it into something that you don't want it to be. So I want you to think about it. What I'll give you on Monday is a sheet that's not really going to tell you anything that you don't otherwise know, but just kind of remind you about structure, remind you about two V verbs, remind you about the 6-line or the 6-word limit for the quote. I did put up last night on Google Classroom a couple possible themes that you could look at, dealing with salvation, redemption, that kind of stuff. That's not telling you to pick one of those arguments, but it's just something to kind of get the mind rolling around if need be. Remember, you got your poem yesterday, so we got that poetry quiz for Thursday of next week. Monday, you're going to get Invisible Man, and we'll start going over some period documents. So 8-push people, you'll kind of be familiar with what we're doing. It'll help achieve Washington.
We already have enough input for one thing.
Not adding on to it.